have the iPad. Yeah. All right. It is time to begin. We'll give Mike the floor here in just a minute. But I've asked Blake to come lead us in an opening prayer, and then Mike will give you the floor. So, Blake.
Pray with me. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for this opportunity to gather here today to worship you openly and freely. We thank you for this opportunity to gain fellowship this weekend and for our guests and speaker and to be able to hear your word. Please open our hearts and minds and help us to take from this lesson and from this Bible study message that we can carry with us and will reflect your word out in the world with us after. Say these things in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
That's fine, yeah. Test one, does that work? Well, there's not a time I ever come out here and think about the wagon trains that came through here, and I just can't fathom. And because Michael and I were complaining about the 6-hour plane delay that we had Friday, 6 hours, and then flew here in 3 hours. Think about the people that left the east by wagon train. I just can't even fathom it. And I love coming out here and seeing all that because it does remind me of all the cowboy and Indian movies I saw growing up. And it's just, I guess you probably take it for granted seeing it every day, but it's just a fantastic place to see. And we love coming out here every single time. So we're going to reverse the two lessons for today because the one for the sermon hour is the story of my wife, and I'm trying to get every congregation where I know somebody to go there. I don't normally invite myself to come and speak, but for her lesson, I do, because everybody needs to hear that, and so we'll do that at the next hour, and I think it'll be something that will encourage you a little bit. So we're going to look at this text here, Romans 8:28, and notice it doesn't say that we know that God causes all things to happen that are bad. It says we know that in all things God works for the good through all things that happen. In Middle Tennessee, and y'all can't understand my accent, can't you? Okay, I kind of a little bit maybe. I spoke back when I was young and had a life. And I was invited to speak at youth functions. Now I'm invited to old folks' homes mainly in Utah. And so I was speaking at this little youth rally up in New York. And when I was becoming a teacher and speaker, I would record myself, not because I enjoyed my lesson, but to work on my speaking. And, because we all have things we shouldn't say. Sometimes we go, too much. And I try to eliminate as many of those as I can. I try to anyway. But listening to myself, I thought, I have a neutral region accent. You can't tell where I'm from. I don't appreciate, again, the sarcasm that runs through this room. But I thought, you just can't tell. And so I go up there and speak, and after my first lesson, these teenagers just come up to me, and they go, say dog. They wanted to make fun of me. They had me pronounce words so they could laugh. Say dog. I said, dog, D-A-W-G. It's dog. Say school. School, S-C-U-L, you know. And I learned then I have a very thick accent. Even now it doesn't sound very Southern and hick. But I've always felt like I need an interpreter some places I go. Because I know this is not your kind of English, but try to overlook that. But this you think I sound country. This is where my wife grew up, and I became youth minister here. And if you use your imagination, you can almost picture me in college if you'll just use your imagination. This was in the 70s when Elvis's sideburns were still popular. And I would end up meeting her here. And I was teaching a class of the youth group. And of course, back then, you know, I was 21 and the youth minister. I still can't believe the elders asked me to do that. I was still going through college. And of course, I thought I was so much older than them. Well, you know, I was just a few years older than them. I'm 68 now. My whole youth group's in their 60s. My first youth group, they're all in the 60s. And in fact, some of them had children before I did. So that was weird when we have reunions and they got kids older than me. But I guess I was talking on dating or marriage or something like that. And one of the girls came up to me. I remember her name was June. And she had these puddles of tears that had formed in her eyes. They hadn't started going down the cheek. You know what, like these little lakes. We could almost hit them and make them flow there. And she came up to me. She told me how that when she was 12, she had an operation and she would never be able to have children. And she just kind of dumped that on me. And this was basically what she was asking me. I didn't do anything wrong. Why is God not going to let me have children? Now, at the end of the lesson, if I haven't told you what I said to her, please don't let me stop without telling you, because I have done that before, forgotten to end with what I told her. And that's what happens, you know, when we get Alzheimer's. We forget. So at the end of the lesson, if I hadn't told you what I told her, never mind, y'all didn't catch that. All right. So my boys growing up, I coached them even from first grade, and that's my son on the real tall one there to the left of me there. And my older son, Brent, when he was in the 8th grade, we were playing a middle school game on the road at a little school. And after the game, you know, I go and talk to the guys in the locker room. Then I left, and I found out that him and 6 of his buddies, there were 7 of them that were kind of real close. They were kind of my 7 main players, and they kind of had a special bond. I hope they didn't leave other people out, but they were talking about something very inappropriately, and I found all this out later. Now, there is locker room talk. And those of you that play sports, and I don't mean vulgar, but I mean, you know, when you're in the locker room, you use language sometimes. I don't mean vulgar, I don't mean cuss, I'm not talking about that. Just rougher language that I might use when I'm up teaching. Okay, I hope I'm not misunderstood there. Not anything wrong or inappropriate, but they were talking about something you shouldn't talk in front of anybody about, anyone's company. Well, one of the little boys that wasn't part of that little group of 7, he went around and told the whole 8th grade class what they were talking about. And they are furious. I mean, because it is embarrassing. And so, at the next practice, when practice was over, I finished talking to the guys, then I go out. And of course, you know, you can't stay in the locker room all the time. And they got the little boy and said, you're going to have to pay for your sins here. And one of them got a styrofoam cup of water, urinated in it, and then they made him drink it. So in their little demented minds, they all went out. It was even Stephen. Even that kid, now I'm not saying what they did was appropriate at all, but in their minds, he knew he had betrayed their trust. And I was even told that one of them, they went out arm in arm with him, like, everything's okay now. You paid for what you did. You paid for your betrayal. Everything's even, Stephen. He felt good. He paid the penance. or drank the penance, and everything was okay. Well, he told his little girlfriend what they made him do. She told her mama. Her mama called the principal. The principal called me in, and I kicked all 7 of them off my team. Outside of that kid I told you about that got killed on our team yesterday, it's the hardest thing I've ever done athletically in coaching, to kick your own kid off the team. Now, for years later after that, I would always tell my future teams, you better watch out. Don't think I won't kick you off my team if you are an idiot. I kicked my own kid off, and I love him more than you. I will kick you off if I have to. I know I will because I did it to my own. But it was very difficult. It was difficult on our family. It was a tough time. And it was just a mess. It was a scandal. Well, that spring, he decided to get a new start. So he wanted to repeat the 8th grade. And this is the following year. We won a little tournament championships there. And here's what happened by getting a new start, by repeating a year. It gave him an extra year in high school. So just imagine a really good freshman athlete at a school going back and playing one more year in high school. That's what he got. He was an older high school kid now. He wasn't good enough to play major college, but he got a scholarship to Freed-Hardeman. Have y'all ever heard of Freed-Hardeman? Some of y'all have heard of Freed. I didn't know if y'all had heard about Freed this far out, but it's a small Christian school, and he got a scholarship there. At Freed-Hardeman, he met his wife. Here he is proposing to her in the student center. Now, had he not gotten that scholarship, he would have gone to Lipscomb University because I taught at the high school, and he would have gotten a 50% discount. So if he's going to go to any other college, it's going to have to be a scholarship because I can't afford it. You know, he's getting that 50% discount. So he ended up at Freed. They got married and gave me these knuckleheads. And I see them often. I think about, they are here because my son made a kid drink urine. Because had that not happened, he would not have repeated 8th grade. He would not have had an extra year to develop. He would not have gotten a scholarship to Freed-Hardeman. He would have gone to Lipscomb. He would have never met Lindsay. And those kids are alive because my kid made somebody drink pee. Can you say pee in church? I'm not sure, but I just did. That's what this lesson's about. We know that in all things, God works for the good. And I mean, I'm not saying you'll always see it plainly like that situation. I mean, that's real obvious that God had a hand in all of that. I don't want you to think there's always the silver lining on everything. There's not. I'm going to give you some examples where you can really see it. Sometimes we might not see the good till we're on the other side. So keep that in mind. Not saying that every time somebody gets fired, so every time somebody leaves somebody, there's automatically a good that's going to come. No, God will use all this stuff for His purpose, and we may not even see it. Here's a boy named Joseph. He gets sold in a yard sale by his brothers. He goes down into Egypt and becomes the prince through a long series of events. Then he gets his family to come down and live with him. His daddy Jacob dies. The boys are now nervous since daddy's dead. Remember, they sold their brother. And Joseph has all the power. And they come up to him, and this is the McPherson version. Okay? Joseph, you promised daddy you wouldn't harm us when daddy died. Remember? And Joseph could have said, boys, when y'all came into town, did y'all notice those big triangular objects? That's where they bury us kings. It takes 20 years for 100,000 slaves just to build one of them. You boys are going to build mine by yourself. You better get started. Or he could have said, boys, off with their heads. They're done. But look what he said instead. Fellas, you meant it for evil. Y'all are trying to do me in, but God meant it for good in order to save many people alive. This is the Old Testament version of Romans 8:28. This right here was the greatest moment in Joseph's history and the rest of the world. Because if this doesn't happen, if he's not sold, he does not go to Egypt, he does not interpret the Pharaoh's dreams, he is not promoted to second in command, he does not know that there's going to be a famine, they would not have known to store up the grain to save the whole world. Joseph would have died in his hometown along with the rest of that part of the world. This was the greatest, most important moment of his life. But he didn't realize at the time, he wasn't, singing as he went down to Egypt land, I'm on my way. He wasn't excited. He didn't think this is going to sound really good in Vacation Bible School one day. But he got it at the end. Everybody got it. You meant it for evil, God meant it for good in order to save many people alive. Paul gets arrested for doing the horrible crime of being a Christian. Look what he says about his arrest. It was a house arrest. It wasn't as bad as a dungeon. But still, house arrest wouldn't be fun. You can't go outside your house, and you are chained to a guard all the time. Wasn't the worst imprisonment, but wasn't the best situation. Look what he said about this situation. He lived there 2 whole years at his own expense. How about that? You have to pay for your own imprisonment. And welcomed all who came to him. There was freedom. People could visit him. This was a very lenient imprisonment. Proclaiming the kingdom of God. Y'all might have not have known this is in the Bible. This is pretty cool. And teaching about Jesus as people came to him. And from there, it set everything up for him to write those letters right there. They're nicknamed the prison epistles. And that all kind of worked out. And then look what he said here when he wrote one of the epistles. My imprisonment in the cause of Christ has become well known with the guards. He has a captive audience. Hey, we're going to have a little one-on-one Bible study here. And all these guards heard about it. And he never griped, like Mike did about the 6-hour delay. And that's all he did was gripe the whole day long. And I said, be positive. I was very upbeat the whole time. Now, let's look at some modern day situations, kind of like with my son. I'd read about a couple that's getting a divorce, and so they were still amicable toward each other, and so they met, it was over in England, they met at a little tavern there to discuss who would get what. They were going to split everything up evenly. Well, he was still at the house, she was staying with her mom. And her car had broken down, so she needed a ride back to her mom. So again, they got along well enough during this separation that he doubled her back on his motorcycle, took her back to her mom's apartment. On the way back, they had a wreck. It was not critical, but they both got banged up and they had to both go to the hospital. They filled out the forms, checked marital status, separated. The nurses in charge of that wing saw the file on them that they were separated. You know what they did? They put them in the same room together. Not out of spite, going, this will be funny, let's watch this. They were hoping that recovering together would bring them back together. And the article I was reading said, and it worked. And the article ended with, who would have thought a motorcycle wreck would have resulted in something good? Now, I can't recommend that for marital counseling. Having trouble with your spouse, get on back, get ready, honey, we're going into the ditch on part. You can't set it up. You can't set up the bad event. You can only look back and go, that motorcycle wreck was the best thing that ever happened in our marriage. I'm telling that story at school one day. And one of our ball players raised his hand. He said, my parents did not know each other, but lived at the same apartment complex. And a tornado came through. And I told you yesterday, tornadoes hit us a lot. And everybody was out there surveying the damage. And the tornado had lifted his future mom's roof and thrown it onto his future dad's car. And so they're out there talking and getting to know each other and exchanging insurance information. And he asked her, well, do you want to go out sometime and talk more about this? And that was their first date. And I'm sitting here looking at a kid that's alive because of a tornado that wrecked an apartment and a car. It doesn't always work that way, I know, okay? But sometimes you can see, it's kind of cool to see when it does. I won't ask for a survey here, but I wonder how many people have been engaged and then one of the future spouses gave the ring back. That would be tough. You have this sweetheart, and then it becomes a broken heart. But they end up marrying somebody else, and it leads to the beating of a new heart. Or like if any of you, if your parents had if one of your parents had an engagement break off, and that was traumatic, you know that was horrible. But it led them to meeting you, like with Brent. Brent would have never met that girl. He would have probably met somebody else. But see, I can't imagine my grandkids being somebody else. If you ever think about that stuff, I'm the only weird one in here, right? It just kind of blows your mind there to think about that. And I didn't come up with this, but I love it. God's gifts are sometimes wrapped in strange packaging. I've had a lot of tragedy. I've told y'all within a 14-month span, I lost my dad, my wife, and my brother. My brother died of alcoholism. He was really a great person, but he social drank through life. I never did. I'm a teetotaler. I'm not judging anybody on that. I just know if you don't drink, you won't become an alcoholic. I just know that for sure. But he did, and then his business went south, and he turned to alcohol instead of the Lord. He came back to the Lord at the end, but it was just days before his liver was gone. So I've taken him, along with several other people in my life, to alcohol rehab centers. I've become very familiar with them. At every single one of them, guess who the director and all the counselors were? They were all what? Recovered alcoholics. Every single one of them. Every one of them. Well, if I would want a recovered alcoholic for my counselor, not a practicing one, but a recovered one, because they understand me. And so God takes this terrible situation in their lives and turns it into something positive. I wished every kid in America could realize how terrible bullying is. I learned that can be very hurtful. I wear a size 15 shoe. Now, since I'm 6'2", you don't notice it quite as much. If I was 5'5", it would stand out more. But my shoe size grew faster than my height. So for a while, I looked like an L that wasn't shaped right. So I'm walking around with these gigantic feet. And, during the snow season, people think, Bigfoot's in our neighborhood. No, it was me. I'd been playing out there earlier. And I'm kicking people at school 5 foot away from me. And there would always be somebody that was just so kind and wonderful. You know how it is in junior high school. You have big feet. Thank you, Sherlock. I had not realized that. But, it made me realize at a very young age, it hurts your feelings when somebody makes fun of your body. And every one of us in here have memories of people that have said things about us. That taught me, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe that hurts them the way that hurt you. Okay? We have been in association with Carbon-Emery, I guess. Well, the first time we came out here was 2000, 25 years ago. But I think we got connected with y'all a few years before that. Is that right, Don? Was it a few years before that? So we've been connected with y'all and face-to-face since 2000. One of our elders at that time was Brother Jack James. This guy was an incredible baseball player. When he was in Little League, he pitched 2 no-hitters in a weekend. Now that's illegal. You can't throw your arm away like that. Here he is signing out of high school a professional contract with the Boston Red Sox. Okay, this guy was good. The University of Virginia, he grew up there. Virginia offered him a full ride, but the Sox invited him to come to the camp and to play in the minor leagues for a couple of years. So he did that. Messed up his knee real badly. The Sox still wanted him to come back. Now, those, if you're a baseball buff, this is when Ted Williams was with the Red Sox. He could have been with Ted Williams, Hall of Famer. And so he decided it's going to be too much work. The Red Sox said, we'll help you with rehab. We want you to try to come back. He said, no, I think it's too much. Instead, he dropped out of baseball and he went to the Airborne, went to boot camp up in Kentucky. And he had a friend, and a friend said, hey, there's this girl, my girlfriend has a friend that, why don't we do a blind date, double date? He goes, okay. He met that girl. He ended up marrying her. Not only did he find his wife, she converted him to Christ. He lost his baseball career and picked up salvation and a spouse. Pretty good trade. And he told us, he said, the best thing that ever happened to me was losing my baseball scholarship. My baseball opportunity. And I know we don't always see it like that. But I think that's what we have to talk to kids about, our children, our grandchildren, that God's going to do something with this. It's going to be rough. When I was I teach at Nashville Christian, small Christian school, and the summer before I went there, one of the football players got his four-wheeler, and him and another buddy tore up the football field with the four-wheeler. Which, when I heard that, I could see an idiot doing it that doesn't like football, but you tore up your own field. That's like you're a baseball player and you rip the backboards down. Yeah, this is just, his name his picture's got to be in the dictionary besides stupid. The school, they had to kick him out before senior year, and he had to do labor around the school all that summer. That was part of the court requirement. And I didn't know him. I went up to him and said, hey, I'm one of the new basketball coaches here. I said, I know you made some mistakes there. I said, all you can do is move forward from right now and learn from it. That's all he can do. And I don't know what happened in his future, but maybe that event pushed him into an arena that was helpful. God's gifts are sometimes wrapped in strange packaging. Incredible story here. If you haven't seen any of the movies or the book, I recommend it. It was about a Dutch family over in Holland. They hid Jews during the Nazi Holocaust. This is Corrie ten Boom, and she was sent to this German prison camp called Ravensbrück. Her and her sister Betsy, I'm not sure what happened to Nolly, but Corrie there on the right and Betsy were sent to this camp. This is a picture of some of the women. It's not them, but this was a labor camp, and it was pretty cruel. And this is just some of the pictures from that camp and what they had to live through. They lived in barracks like this, and there they are packed in. And I used to get aggravated having to share a bedroom with my little brother. We weren't packed in that close. There's always somebody who's got a little worse than you do. So Corrie and her sister, they were very spiritual kids. They were young kids, like probably in their late teens when all of this happened. And they would occasionally have little Bible studies with some of the other girls in there. And they came across this verse in Thessalonians. In everything, give thanks. Now, Betsy, and this is going to sound bad the way I say this, she was almost too spiritual for her age. And I know that sounds terrible because, how could they be? But you know what I mean. We all know kids, maybe some of them were yours, maybe you were one, where they're so much more mature than you think they would be. Here's a kid having his 10th birthday party, and everybody's having a good time. He's sitting in the living room like this, and someone comes up, hey, what's wrong? How can I have a happy birthday when there's so much sorrow in the world? Kid, lighten up and go play pin the tail on the donkey and have some birthday cake. Lighten up a little bit. But she was like that. And she said, look what that says. It says, in everything give thanks. We need to thank God for everything. Well, their barracks, all the girls had contracted fleas. They all had fleas. And Betsy said, Corrie, look what the verse says. We're supposed to thank God for the fleas. And Corey's going, Betsy, I'm not thanking God for fleas. Look at the verse. Look what it says. It says in everything. And she said, we're supposed to. Look at that, Corey. She said, okay. Let's have, dear God, thank you for our fleas. And then later they found out that the guards were going from barrack to barrack, assaulting women. And when they got to their barrack and they saw the girls had fleas, they bypassed it and didn't touch the girls. And when they found out, they had a devotional and they said, thank you, God, that we had fleas. And that's the name of one of the chapters in her book, Thank God for the Fleas. Don't normally do that. But there again, God's gifts are sometimes wrapped in strange packaging. What's this right here? Slave ship. You see how they diagrammed it out so they can pack as many people in every square inch. Sadly. We did this, and of course England did this also. It's one of the most embarrassing blights on our country and on other countries that have done the same thing, and some that still do it today. But God takes bad things. And if you're a basketball player, what's something good that came from that? Doesn't mean it was okay to have slavery. But I've had numerous really good black players and wonderful students in my youth group, in church, in school. And slavery brought most of them here. That doesn't mean slavery is okay then. It's that God does take terrible situations and turn them into something good. If you know who this is, you are old. Do I have any hands? Does anybody know? Oh, young people know this. Unbelievable. All right. He was one of the great preachers in the South in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. This guy, Marshall Keeble, he was so popular, even during the days of segregation in America. Caucasian congregations had him come and preach. Look, this crowd was so big they had to bring kids up on the platform because they didn't have seating room. He was that kind of guy. It's been estimated that 50,000 people have been baptized at his preaching trips and campaigns. 50,000. Maybe something good came from a terrible situation. Let me use a silly illustration for what we're talking about. Now, Blake, I don't know if you've done a lot of tough work before in your life, so you may not recognize what some of these tools are. But I was a young dad. I was chainsawing up in a tree. And the chainsaw, it can be quite dangerous if you don't relieve the pressure properly on the limbs. People have been knocked out. They've been severely injured. Well, and you can get it pinched if you don't lift out the blade in time. And that's what's happened here. That's what happened to me. I was using my dad's chainsaw, and I got it wedged in there, and it bent the frame, ruined it. Now I'm behind on my work. I've got to go borrow a neighbor's chainsaw. I got to buy my dad a new one, so I was real aggravated. So I got a neighbor's chainsaw. So I was up cutting again. And once again, I didn't relieve pressure properly. And while I was cutting, it was a limb above me. And that limb snapped, and it hit the top of the chainsaw, and the blade, and I mean in just a fraction of a second, went boom, right there on my thigh. I fell off the 6-foot ladder, screaming, waiting to see my leg laying over on the side. And there wasn't even a cut there. I mean, I was hollering, screaming in the background. Then I realized I'm not hurt. It didn't even hurt. There's no cut. Because this chainsaw had a brake on it that as soon as you take your trigger off, your finger off the trigger, it stops. And it stopped just right before it would have hit me. My dad's model was older. It did not have a brake. It was one of those where you release it, it finally winds down. Had I not ruined my dad's chainsaw, I'd have cut right through my leg. I'd have either bled to death or I'd be up here with a cane. One of the greatest moments of my life was when I ruined my dad's chainsaw. It was a glorious moment. Aggravating at the time, but turned out that wasn't the case. This is the church building I grew up in, and when I was 18, I guess the congregation was mad at me. They made me teach the 7th grade boys' Bible class. That's them there. My brother is the one second from the left over here. And this was a tough class to teach. One of the boys that's not pictured there, his name was Jerry. Jerry was a pain every single Sunday, every single week. And Jerry had come from a really rough part of town. Our church building, we were a typical Leave It to Beaver, Mayberry, middle-class, Caucasian congregation. But we sat in a community of roughnecks. It was a rough neighborhood. And the good thing is, some of those kids occasionally came in from the neighborhood. And one of them came in, and Jerry was really rough. But Jerry wanted to make sure that he was known that night, and he wanted to aggravate me the whole time. So I took Jerry. He wouldn't shut up. I placed him outside in the hallway for one of the education people to come by and pick him up and deal with him. And I went back to teaching. Boom! My door comes flying open. Jerry's sitting there in the threshold. He's kicked it open. He's just grinning so big. I went over, quietly shut the door, didn't say anything. Boom! He kicks it open again. Now I'm furious. I just leave the rest of them. I go out. I'm not saying what I did is right, okay? I went out and I grabbed him and I picked him up. And I was just dragging him down the hallway. I said, I'm taking you down to the elders or whoever was in charge down there. And he was a tough 7th grader, but I was a 12th grader. But he wanted to hit me, and he was bringing his fist back while I was dragging. He said, I want to hit you. I want to hit you. And I was sitting there thinking, I hope you do. Then I get to do what I would like to do. That will give me license in court, because you hit me first. I took him, threw him down there and said, I can't teach this kid. I went to my youth minister. I said, I can't teach these guys. This is over my head. This is more than I can take. Then I found out that Jerry's home life was a little different than mine. Jerry's dad would be sitting around on Saturday afternoon getting drunk with his buddies. He'd say, Jerry, let's show them how tough you are. And Jerry would roll up his shirt, and his dad would take a live cigarette and stick the butt right to him and just burn him. And Jerry would just sit there like this. And his dad would proudly say, way to go, Jerry, show them how tough you are. That's the home he came from. And I'm expecting him to come into class, Brother McPherson, break unto us the word of life. Jerry took his life when he was 18. And you know what that taught me? I need to find out what's going on in my students' lives when they're a problem. Because there's something going on somewhere. You know that. If you were a problem kid, I bet there was some problem in your life. If your kids were a problem in school, there was something going on somewhere in their life. You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good in order to save many people. I went to a new school called Apollo. I love that name because this was during the Apollo moon trips and all that. And I don't know, can you spot me there? Do you see me anywhere? Right there. And so I loved basketball. So I went out. I was in the 7th grade. I went out for the 7th and 8th grade basketball team. This is the team photo of that team. If you'll look closely, you won't see me pictured. At the tryouts, I had high hopes. I just pictured myself dominating, just going to be good. I'm going to be good. Well, the coach lined us up, and for 30 minutes we did layups. Now, as a coach, I've conducted tryouts for over 40 years. We give all the kids a good look for 3 days. We do all types of drills. We have competitions. They play 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 5-on-5. And I look at everybody. I have other coaches help me evaluate. Here's how they evaluated us in 1970. We did layups for 30 minutes. He called 3 or 4 of us over and said, you guys are going to get cut anyway, so go into the locker. I guess my layups were really bad because that was the whole evaluation was based on the layup. We never got to play, never got to go against anybody. And so real quickly, my dreams of stardom went right down the tubes there, and it was over. Well, I grow up, I become a coach, and there's no good way to cut a kid, but that's not the way you do it. I'm really glad they cut me that way. At the time, I didn't feel that way, but I'm glad now because that stuck with me, and there's no good way to cut a kid, but you don't do it that way. What's this here? Nah. Yeah, that's sodium. What's chloride? Put them together, what do you got? Salt. Eat them separately, you die. Here's two poisons. You put them together, and it's something that makes our food taste better. You've heard your whole life, if life hands you lemons, then do what? Make lemonade. I like to qualify that with, let God make the lemonade. You can't make it. God takes the bitterness, the stuff that's way too tangy, and He combines it with the sugar and makes something nice. Those of you that have cross-stitched and crocheted, or which one is this? Cross-stitching? I don't do a lot of it, so I don't know. So on the back is a mess, but then you flip it over, and what do you see? Something beautiful. I said something beautiful. Very beautiful. But on the back side, it's a mess. This is our lives. But on the other side, God is developing something. You meant it for evil. God meant it for good. Joseph was placed in charge of Pharaoh's jail to get him ready to be in charge of Pharaoh's country. We know that God causes all things to work together for good. Now, as we wrap this up, and I'm going to tell you what I told that little girl back at my church in 1978 in a minute. It does not say the good is for everyone. Okay? If I make this kid drink urine and I get kicked off the team and that drives me to go get a scholarship over here and I meet this girl and neither one of us become Christians, that good didn't mean anything. So what? So what? I met her. We're not going to heaven. So the good doesn't say it's for everybody. It says it's for those who love God. Also, it does not say that God causes the bad. No one should say that I've been tempted by God. God cannot be tempted by evil. He can't do anything wrong. And He Himself tempts no one. It doesn't say you'll like the result. In the next hour, you're going to hear some things about my wife passing away. Did you know goods come from it? I don't like that. I wish the good could come from another situation. I've seen a lot of good. But I liked it more the other way, but I don't get a choice in that. And it never says it will all work out in this life. But God, in His providence, He sees everything ahead of time. And He's going to work all of that stuff out. God's providence is when He sees things ahead of time and He's able to work things out. So, I'm talking in this class, teaching this class. This little girl comes up to me and she's 16. And she says she cannot have children. And I really think, I was 21. I wasn't smart enough to come up with this. I know sometimes people get uncomfortable with, well, God spoke to me. And I don't hear God talking to me. I just think sometimes God's Spirit works in a non-miraculous way. And I said to her this. I said, one day you're going to meet a guy and y'all are going to get serious about each other and you're going to have to tell him that you can't have kids. And he's going to say, that's okay, we're going to adopt. And I said, y'all are going to adopt a kid and that kid's going to get to go to heaven because you couldn't have children. You think that's happened? Yeah. I was down in Chattanooga. That's another part of the hick part of Tennessee where they talk even worse than this. And I was at a church camp and I told that exact story. Another 16-year-old girl comes up to me. She's got tears just flying like this. And she said, I have always resented being adopted until you told that story. Then I started tearing up and said, well, I'm glad I came down here. So I'm telling those stories in my high school class at school one day. And this girl raised her hand and she tells about how she was adopted from Russia by a Christian American family. Her mama in Russia was a prostitute. Her mom died and she laid in the bed with her dead mom for 3 days before they found her. She got adopted, came to the United States, and end up going to Disneyland and getting baptized. The best thing that ever happened to that girl was her mom dying. That girl had no hope. She had zero hope. The best thing, maybe not for that mom, but it was for that little girl. And I think that's what Romans 8 is all about. So, if you have any thoughts, you want to throw them out right now, or anything you want to share? Not? All right. We'll take a break, and we got a lot of breakfast food stuff in there. And then we're going to eat lunch right after that, so we want to make sure no one's hungry. If you start getting hungry, get in there and get something quickly so you do not stay hungry. Thanks for helping on all this stuff.
And put this one for
Then
you.
I can have one permanently, right? It's all over there. Thank you for doing that. I didn't even think about that. It's wonderful. I'll do that when I go up then. That'd be great.